mostly Bindoji's talks on Advaita. The ongoing sessions are on Bhagavad Gita from an Advaita perspective. And we are on chapter 3, and this is room number 4. So the schedule is 8:30 p.m. IST on weekdays, except on Friday, which is we have an open discussion on Bhagavad Gita. And then on Sunday, 8:30 p.m. IST, it is Advaita open discussion, where all Advaitic topics are engaged. And the routine is when Bindoji talks, we shut down the chat and the hand raising for an hour, after which the hand raising and the chat is open for Q&A discussions. And if you want to listen to the replays, they are available on Clubhouse. And I've shared 3 links in the chat, which is from YouTube, Spotify, and podcast. The YouTube channel is called Advaita Retold. And you find the repository of all the talks there if you want to catch up. There is also a link to one of the recently published books called Imaginary Door, authored by Artemisia, based on Bindoji's contributions in Clubhouse from Advaita perspective. And with that brief introduction, Bindoji, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prakash. Namaste and Hari Om to all of you. Let me do my invocation. Namo Brahmadibhyo Brahma Vidya Sampradaya Kartrubhyo Vamsha Rishibhyo Mahadbhyo Namo Gurubhyaha Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutravashikritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishwaro Guru Ratmedi Murti Veda Vivagine Vyomavat Pyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. The Gita Dhyana Slokam. Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudramarutaha Stunnandi Divyaistavai Vedai Sangapadakramो Upanishadaihi Gayanti Yam Samaga Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyandam Navidussura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha. Om. We are discussing the third chapter, 4th verse. The 4th, 5th and 6th, the 3 of them go together. So each one is connected to the next one. So in the 4th we saw that karma is necessary but is not sufficient. And renunciation is necessary but only after knowledge. And knowledge alone liberates. So the difference between the knowledge which is meant for renunciation and the knowledge which liberates, they are different, but they are, helping each other. Where the renunciation takes place, where we do away with the doership and enjoyership. When that doership and enjoyership is renounced, the knowledge of the self dawns on us. That is not a knowledge, that is an awareness, a consciousness. But here we use the word knowledge. So I wanted to clarify between the two. And there is a pitfall which can happen when we do short-circuiting of this as a process. So this passage destroys both the karmic absolutism and anti-karma quietism. Continuing on that, Krishna says, Nahi kaschit chanamapi jatu tishtatya karma krita. Karyate hyavashak karma sarva pragatijai gunaihi. These verses contain two syntactic units, each line unique in itself. The first line is Nahi kachchit kshanamapi jatu tishtati akarmakrit or akarmakrit tishtati. For indeed, no one ever remains even for a moment without performing action. It's a very pertinent statement from Krishna. No one ever remains even for a moment inactive. To substantiate that, is telling the second line, Sarvahi avasya prakrtijai gunaihi karma karyate. I have read the prose order. For every person, why it is so? Because every person is helplessly driven into action by the gunas born from Prakriti. And that is the reason why no one ever remains even for a moment without performing action. In the creation, Trigunatmika, Prakriti, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, is the reason why the creation is becoming a source for guna. Therefore, what is being created out of Prakriti will necessarily have the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. And due to the variation of Sattva, Rajas or Tamas, there will be activity in those creations also. Therefore, the second sense gives the reason for the first. The reason no one can remain inactive is because Prakriti's gunas perpetually impel every embodied being into activity. Nahi. Nahi means, these are the two words here, which is for indeed not, or explains with affirmation that indeed no one can. Kaschit means anyone. Kshanam api, even for a moment. Jatu tishtati, at any point of time remain. Akarmakrit means without doing any activity or as a non-doer of action. Therefore, no embodied being can never ever remain even for an instant without performing some action, whether gross or subtle. Karyate is made to act. Again, he means indeed. Indeed, he is made to act. Avashaha. Avashaha means helplessly, without any independence, without any free will, or without any volition of inactivity. Volition of inactivity is not possible. Karma sarva prakriti jaihi. Therefore, action is born out of Prakriti. Prakriti Jai means born out of Prakriti. Sarva means for everyone, for all embodied being. It is Prakriti Jai Gunai, the gunas born out of the Prakriti. This is interlocking with the earlier verse, and there are two truths. There are truths which are of importance in Advaita Vedanta. First, the verse demolishes the position that of a hypocrite, Mityachara, which is going to be described in the next verse. One who physically restrains the organs of action while mentally dwelling on sense objects. The impossibility of true inaction at the bodily level is established here. The second Advaitic truth is, which is more profoundly, the phrase Avasha Prakritijai Gunai Karyate reveals that the Advaitic understanding that Kartrutva, the doership, is not a willful or choice. All apparent agency belongs to the guna operating within Prakriti. Therefore, the activity is those who identify with the body. The Atman or the self is intrinsically akarta, is a non-doer, because Atman is not the body. The ignorant jiva, falsely identifying with Prakriti as the body and its modification, superimposes the doership on the self. And this verse anticipates the great declaration which Krishna is going to make in the 27th verse in the same chapter. Prakrite kriyamanani gunaihi karmanihi sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. What does it say, that verse? All actions are performed entirely by the gunas of the Prakriti with which the embodied being is ordered. One whose self is deluded by ego thinks, I am the doer. So the interconnection of the verses are very important. That is why the verse which is being mentioned now has a ramification when he is uttering the 27th verse. When we do that, we should remember that why is inaction not possible when you have identification with the body-mind-intellect complex should be remembered. Let us go into the commentary by Shankaracharya here. Nahi yasmat kshanamavi kalam jadu kadachit kaschit tishtati akarmakrit san kasmat kadyate pravartyate ihi yasmat avashaha eva aswatantra eva karma sarva pranihi prakrtijaihi prakritoho jatai sattva rajas tamosobhi gunaihi. So, nahi yasmat kshanamavi kalam jadu kadachit kaschit tishtati akarmakrit. For no one ever at any point of time whatsoever remains even for a single moment without performing action. Here, Shankaracharya begins with a empirical ontological fact, but not a moral injunction. Kshanamapi, even for a unit of time. Kshanam means it's a unit of time. Kaschit, whatsoever, no embodied being whatsoever. Kaschit means all inclusive, embodied beings. Akarmakrit san, in a state of non-action. This directly destroys our illusion that one can choose inactivity by volition while embodied. Bodily movement is not equal to non-action or inaction. Breathing, sensing, thinking, these continue regardless of the intention. Tasmat karyate pravartyate hi yasmat avashaha eva aswatantra eva karma sarvaha pranibi. Why is it so? Because every living being is indeed compelled or forced or driven into action because helpless and independent. Shankaracharya answers why inactivity is impossible. Because karyate or pravartyate is causative force, not a voluntary choice. Avashaha means powerless, He has no independency. Aswatantrata is the lack of autonomy or independency. I mean, he is not independent. This is the devastating for an egoic fantasy control. Because if somebody thinks that by fantasy that he can remain non-doer without activity or engagement, Shankaracharya, no, Krishna says, no way. Agency belongs to Prakriti, not to the self. So the agency to do and not to do is not a choice for an embodied person. He is helplessly into activity either physically or mentally. Prakriti jai prakriti prakritito jataihi sarva sattva-rajas-tamasbihi gunaihi. Because they are driven by the gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas, born of Prakriti, arising from Prakriti, it means entirely in Prakriti. These gunas are the dynamic principles and they are not moral qualities which we may confuse with. And therefore they force motion, cognition, desire, etc. Thus action is guna generated. It is not initiated by the self. This also prepares a later teaching which is coming in 28 also. After 27 comes 28. Where Krishna says, Guna Guneshu Vartande. That these qualities, Guneshu Vartande, for the purpose of the gunas of the Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. That is where it is staying. Atnya iti Vakya Sheshaha. The word ignorant is to be added as per Shankaracharya as an implicit subject, because Shankaracharya makes a crucial grammatical clarification here that this statement is everyone is compelled to act applies only to the ignorant, not universally. Because ignorance is the identification with the body-mind. Hence subjected to gunas. This is not a psychological ignorance, but Atma Ajnana is the absence of knowledge of the self. And it yato vakshati gunayor na vichalyate. Later Krishna will say, he who is not shaken by the gunas in the 23rd verse. So here, this verse should be remembered. Wherever gunas aspects are being told, we should remember this verse of that. Na kaschit kshanam abhijatu tishtatya karma krita. That should be remembered. In the 14:23 is where Krishna is saying that, gunair yo na vichalyate. He is not driven by the gunas. Who? The jnanis. Thus, the verse 3.5 is not a universal determinism, but a conditional determinism excluding the jnanis. And the 6th sentence of Shankaracharya is decisive restriction on Karma Yoga. Sankhyanam pradakkaranat ajnanam eva hi Karma Yoga na jnaninam. Because the Sankhyas, men of knowledge, are distinguished separately. Karma Yoga indeed belongs to the ignorant, not to the knowers. Therefore, Shankaracharya excludes jnanis from Karma Yoga. Because Karma Yoga presupposes doership and presupposes the effort, presupposes purification, chitta shuddhi, etc. Therefore, it applies only where ignorance operates. Atma is nitya shuddha muddha mukta. Therefore, it is not one who has identified himself as Atma. Therefore, it implies only where the ignorance operates, and this is not an elitism or making some set of people the elites of the society. It's a logical necessity. Why Karma Yoga cannot apply to Jnanis? Jnaninantu gunaihi achala manananam swataha chalana abhavat karma yoga na upapadyate. But for the knowers who are not moved by the gunas, because they don't identify with the body, mind, intellects. Therefore, karma yoga is not possible for the jnanis who are not identifying with the body, mind, intellects. Because there is no self-initiated movement. The Atma is akarta. There is no doership in Atma. So, gunaihi achalyamananam, unmoved by the prakriti, swataha chalana abhavat. The self has no intrinsic action. These are pure metaphysics of Advaita. Thus, action cannot be owned, effort cannot be claimed, discipline cannot be practiced for a jnani. So the jnani does not avoid karma yoga. Karma yoga collapses automatically for a jnani because there is no karminder. One who is doer is not there. Therefore, doer is not there. The karma yoga is also not there. And Shankaracharya gives a reference to the verse 221 also in his commentary. Tadacha vyakyatam veda vinashinam nityam ajama vyayam. And this is already been explained there in the passage that he who knows the indestructible Atma, Veda, avinashinam. The avinasham in indestructible way, the one who knows the indestructible Atma. He is free from this. And the self is unborn, unmoving, actionless. So therefore this statement of Krishna attributing action on the body due to ignorance is not something new. It is consistent from the verse number 221 from the second chapter. So 3-4, 3-5 crystallized here. Embodied ignorance cannot be avoided, cannot avoid action. Action is Guvan-driven, not self-driven. Karma yoga belongs to the Ajnani, those who think I am the body, mind, intellect complex. Jnaninam akarta. The jnanins are non-doers. They don't have a doership. Because by knowledge, they have identified with the Atma, which is an akarta. And it is not by restraint like that of a karma yoga. True Naishkarmya is ontological, not a behavioral thing. This we saw it in the last class. So the ignorant cannot stop acting, whereas the knower does not act even while acting. Ettu anatmajnyaha choditam karma anarabade, and the karma na arabade, idi tadasad eva ityaha karmendriyani samyamya ya aste manasachara smaran indriyarthan vimoudatma mityacharasa uchyate. The sixth verse is defining now the hypocrite. Yaha karmendriyani samyamya manasa indriyarthan smaran aste saha vimudatma mityacharasa uchyate. That is, he who, having restrained the organs of action, please understand, he is restraining only the organs of action, means outwardly he is inactive, sits mentally dwelling upon the objects of the senses, but his mind is doubly active because of his inner turmoil, because of the gunas. He is not in control of his gunas. Therefore, that person is thoroughly deluded and is called a hypocrite, mithyachara. The word mithyachara means hypocrite. So karmendriyani means the organs of action. Samyamya, one who controls that. Ya aste manasa, one who remains in the, he who remains in the mind, smaran, by in the memory, remembering or mentally dwelling upon. Indriyarthan means sense objects. The mind is mentally dwelling upon the objects of the senses. While karmendriyani are outwardly stilled, the andakarana is fully engaged in the sense objects, making the restraint outwardly hollow. He is called a vimudhatma, or atma vimudha means deluded. Visheshena mudha, vimudha. Atman means who thinks that I am, who doesn't think, he is not aware that he is intensifyingly deluded. One whose self is thoroughly deluded. Such a person is called saha mityachara uchyate. He is called a hypocrite. One who possessed of false conduct. Shankaracharya reads this verse as Krishna's direct condemnation of specific type of spiritual pretenders who adopt the external mark of sannyasa or yoga without corresponding inner transformation. Therefore, this verse interlocks with the previous two verses. First verse establishes the primacy of mental action over physical action. Mere bodily stillness is not renunciation. True sannyasa requires cessation of mental sankalpa, the will toward sense objects, not merely restraint of hand and feet, etc. This connects directly to the Advaitic understanding that Advaita and karma reside in the andakarana. Avidya and karma reside in the andakarana, not in the physical organs. Physical organs are mere tools for functioning. Secondly, Vimudhatma is a philosophically precise word by Krishna. It points to Atma Anatma Viveka Abhava, the absence of discrimination between the true self and the non-self, which is the body-mind-intellect complex. The hypocrite's fundamental error is adhyasa. Because superimposition or superimposing the properties of the Prakriti Guna upon the self, thereby remaining trapped in a cycle of kartrutva and bhoktrutva, doership and enjoyership. And the third verse implicitly defends the path of Karma Yoga for the ignorant or unqualified person. If one is not yet fit for genuine jnana nishta or the steadfastness of knowledge, then be honest, wholehearted to be engaged in action with an inner detachment which is far superior to the fraudulent imitation of jnani outwardly. Shankaracharya thus uses this verse as a pivot for protecting integrity of both paths by exposing the corruption that results from confusing the outer appearances. So in his Bhashya he says that Karmendriyani hastyadayani samyamya samhritya ya aste tishtati manasa smaran chindayan indriyartan vishayan vimudatma vimudha andakaranaha mityacharaha mrishacharaha papacharaha sa uchyate. So hastendriya hastadini, all the organs of action like the hands and the rest, samyamya samhritya, having restrained or withdrawn, yatishtati ya aste, one who remains inward, inactive outwardly, whereas manasa smaran chindayan, while remembering and through the mind, what? Indriyartha vishayan, the objects of the sense through the mind. Vimudhatma is vimudha antakaranaha. One whose self is deluded means not the Atma, but he thinks that I am the body, whose inner instrument is deluded. Antakarana vimudha. Vimudha Atma here Atma doesn't mean self. Here Atma is used for Antakarana or the inner instrument. Mithyachara, Mrishachara, Papachara, all the same meaning. False practitioner or a deceitful practitioner or a sinful practitioner. That is what he is known as. So the full sense of the verse is, he who restraining and withdrawing the organs of action such as the hands, etc., in the pose of meditative thing and sits inactive outwardly, even while meditating, inwardly remembers and thinks upon the sense objects he is interested in, released in by default of the gunas of the nature of the mind. And he cannot do because nakaschit chanamapi jatu tishtatya karmagrit. Even for a moment, he cannot remain idle because his mind will be ever driven because of pragati jai gunaihi, because of the nature of the inner instrument. Such a one whose self or the inner instrument is deluded is called a mithyachara, a deceitful practitioner or a sinful practitioner. So Shankaracharya is very clear in his exposition. External restrainment is not renunciation. Renunciation is inward disidentification and not an outward immobility. Mental indulgence proves the bondage is still there in such a person. Manasa smaran chindayan indriyarthan. Desires continues, samskara continues, raga dvesha continues. As long as sits idle, he may not show it, but the moment he wakes up from his inactivity, he is full of raga and dvesha. This action has merely shifted planes. From the gross physical level, it has become a mental activity. So Shankaracharya's definition is that unacted desire is still action at the mental level. Therefore, such a person is called a vimudha or a mithyachara. Because avidya is masquerading as vairagya. So this hypocrisy with the metaphysical consequences That is that why this matters doctrinally is not merely giving moral advice. He is safeguarding Advaita from two distortions by thinking liberation is there as by when you stop action. That is not right. And Shuddha Sannyasa, abandoning karma without knowledge. The abandoning of karma is a natural happening when you do not identify with the body, mind, intellects. For Atma level, there is no action. He is just even the nature of witnessing is an action. Even witnessing is not there in Atma. He is totally free from the clutches of the inner organs, Antakarana. Ignorance necessarily expresses itself as desires in the Antakarana. Therefore, desire necessarily puts one into action, even whether it is in the mental level. Therefore, the ignorant cannot stop acting, whereas suppression is not liberation or transcendence. Mental craving nullifies outward renunciation. Outwardly he may be renounced, but mentally he is craving. So true Naishkarmya arises only from knowledge, not otherwise. But not by physically remaining inactive, you are not achieved Naishkarmya. This prepares the contrast which is going to come in the next verse, 3:7. A true Karma Yogin acts outwardly, but inwardly he is unattached. That is what is coming in the verse number 7. Yastu indriyani manasa niyamya arabhade Arjuna karmendriyahi karma yogaha asakta sa vishishyate. It's relative to the same previous three verses. Correlative construction parallel to the previous ones. Yastu manasa indriyani niyamya karmendriyaihi asaktaha karma yogam arabhate saha vishishyate. This is the prose order. But he who, having restrained the senses by mind, engages in the yoga of action through the organs of action without attachment, sa vishishyate, he excels. Please understand very clearly. He who indriyani, yastu indriyani manasa samyamya, niyamya. He who regulates, restrain, or bring it under control by the mind at the mental level. All the sense organs. Here, jnanendriyani, organs of perception, and implicitly their tendencies towards the objects. That is what is getting niyamya, regulated. Not the physical indriyas. Aravadhe Arjuna, O Arjuna, not reluctant or discarding activity. By what? Karmendriyaihi. By using the karmendriyas or the organs of action. Panipada payupasta, vakpanipaya upasta. These are all those things. The organs of action. Speech, hands, legs. this secretion, etc. So these are all the karmendriyas. These karmendriyani samyamya. While mind wandered, he becomes a mithyachara or a hypocrite. Whereas the one who uses mind under restriction and engages the organs of action, karmendriya, in karma yogam, the yoga of action or a disciplined action. Karma yoga as a performance of prescribed action as offering without attachment to the results thereof, as a means of chitta shuddhi, becomes the purifier of inner organ, leading eventually to the fitness of jnana nishta. That is the purpose of karma yoga. What is that thing? It is disciplined action. Karma is done as an offering without attachment to the results. Phalasakti. That is why karmani eva adhikarahe not on the fruits of action. Ma phaleshu kadajana. That means becomes the chitta shuddhi or a purifier of inner organ. Outwardly he is doing, but inwardly he is offering it and not accepting the results of the action. That is why the jnana nishta it is the path of the jnana. Why because he is asakta. He is no more attracted towards action or the fruits of action. He is unattached without clinging for anything. Shankaracharya identifies asakti as the root of asakti, as the root of bondage. Attachment to the fruit of action, karma phala, and to one's identity is that I am the doer, kartrutva. These two put together is the asakti. That is the fruit of action and the doership. Only when you have the doership, you will expect the fruit of action. So both the doership and the fruits of action should not be there. Thus, it points to an inner disposition of vairagya, which transforms the action, mere action, into karma yoga. This single word contains the entire teaching of nishkama karma. The word asakta, that is the word. That single word contains the entire teaching of nishkama karma. Saha vishishyate. Such a person or he, vishishyate means distinguishes or excels. He is being superior to others. He is distinguished, excels, superior. Objective authority. This is not merely comparative praise, but a shastriya verdict of superiority. But superior to whom? To mithyachara. To the previous verse where we saw the hypocrite. He is superior to the hypocrite. And implicitly to the mere inactive person who neither controls the mind or engages in proper action. So this verse is establishing the adhikara, qualification and proper domain of karma yoga for those who are not yet fit for jnana nishta. First is instrumental. Manasa niyamya is a philosophical decisive. Genuine restraint follows from within to outward, from antakarana to indriya. not from external compulsion or social performance. This inner to outer movement is the mark of authentic sadhana. Second, asakta is the operative word that transforms karma into karma yoga. Because everybody is doing, nat kaschit chanamabi dhatu tishtatya karma krit. Krishna has said that. Even for a moment you cannot remain as inaction. But that action, when done with asakti, it becomes karma yoga. That is, action performed with attachment brings fruit which binds the jiva more and more tightly to samsara, while the same actions are not different. It is the same action. When performed in a spirit of Ishwararpana or offering to a Lord or to a higher goal, without personal appropriation for the results, becomes a means of andakarana shuddhi. Purification leading to dawn of viveka and eventual jnana. How does this happen? When we do action as an offering without personal appropriation of the result, purifies the mind, andakarana. And it is in the same andakarana, the viveka and eventual jnana takes place. So it's so important that the andakarana shuddhi, or the purification of the inner instrument, can be achieved only while performing the action. The action is offered to the Lord, and the fruits of action is also offered to the Lord. This is what Krishna will tell Arjuna later. Nimitta matram bhava sabhyasajin. You become only an instrument. When you become an instrument, you are not having the ownership of the doing. You don't have the doership. Nor do you have the desire, intensity or appropriation for the fruits of action. So this is the method which is called the karma yoga. The karma yoga can be practiced only by these two actions. You have to necessarily be in the action, because prakriti jai gunai karma indriyani. All the indriyas, whether it is the sense organs or perception or action, they are driven by the gunas of the creation of the prakriti. Means eyes can only see, ears can only hear. That is the prakriti guna. Because that is the guna which was put in the ears. Shabda gunagam is the sound, is the guna for the ears. So it can hear only the sound. Like that, all the sense organs have got the gunas in it. And the action, all of them are, you have limitations of action also. And that limitation is because they are created with the prakriti guna. Hands can do what hands can do only. Legs can do what legs can do. Like that, vak, pani, pada, aya, upastha, all of them, all the five sense organs of action can do only what they are designed for. So we have no control on the organs of action, nor do we have a control on the actions of perception or the organs of perception. They are Prakriti Jai, because of the guna of the Prakriti. When that is the state, where is the difference that makes us different from a deluded person to a person who is doing karma yoga? We are not going to sit idle like a hypocrite pretending to be doing restriction of action. But mentally active he is. Whereas the karma yogi offers both the action and the fruits of action to the Lord. Thereby, no bhoktritva, no ownership or no enjoyership. Neither he is doer nor he is an enjoyer. This can happen only when he does it in the form of a karma yoga. So the third, Shankaracharya uses the verse with this larger instrument in the strategic, having condemned the hypocrite who mimics the jnani's outer stillness. The Lord now affirms that for the karma adhikarin, a honest engagement in action with inner non-attachment is not merely acceptable but positive vishishta. He is being given a distinguishing superiority compared to the rest of the people. This protects the dignity of the karma yogin, or one who is genuinely and necessarily preparatory path of the karma yoga, without ever elevating it into equality of the jnana-nishta. He doesn't claim himself to be a jnana-nishta, or he is in the path of knowledge, or as a direct means of liberation. He knows that he is in a state of preparedness. So therefore, yastu punaha karmanya adhikritya yat atmyaha buddhindriyani manasa niyamya arabade arjuna karmendriyahi vatpani badabihi kim arabade ityaha karma yogam asaktaha san phalabhisandhi varjitaha saha vishishyate idarasmad mithyacharat. On the other hand, the ignorant person who is qualified for action, or one who is not yet attained self-knowledge, one whose adhikara lies in the action but not in the renunciation. Karma yoga is not a universal discipline but an adhikari bound one. You have to be an eligible person for it. Not a straight, every deluded person is a karma yogi. No. You are dedicating yourself to the path of jnana for which you are doing the preparation. So this person is not spiritually inferior, but only situated earlier in the path. Buddhirindriyani manasa niyamya, when having restrained the sense organs of cognition by the mind, he reverses the defect of the 3.6 where the hypocrite is doing is reversed by the karma yogin here. Desires arise first in the cognition level, not at the action level. Thus, this person begins where discipline must begin, at the level of perception and desire, not merely at the bodily level. Arabhade Arjuna karmendrihai vakpani adibihi. O Arjuna, he undertakes action by means of organs of action of speech, hand and the like. He is engaged in action. External action continues, but there is no inward indulgence for him. He is not a hypocrite because his mind is governed, action is transparent, duty is not abandoned. Therefore, this action becomes purifying and not binding. What does he undertake? Shankaracharya signals that a definition. This is a definition, not an embellishment. What does he do? The definition of Karma Yoga is given like this. As Karma Yogam is asaktaha san phalabhi sandhi varjitaha. A Karma Yoga means being unattached, free from intention towards results. So, Shankaracharya isolates the two essential conditions for Karma Yoga. One is asakti, phala abhisandha varjita. Asakta means non-attachment to the action itself. Even for action, he doesn't have an attachment. It is not that I should do. Action is happening, I am being an instrument. So there is no desire for action. Not only that, phalabi sandhi varjitaha. There is no orientation towards the results of the action. This is not a moral altruism. It is an epistemic preparation. Why? Because attachment reinforces doership. And doership reinforces ignorance. Thus the Karma Yoga is ignorance removing. Ignorance attenuating, not ignorance abolishing. Karma Yoga retains ignorance. It doesn't abolish. But sa vishishyate itarasmad mityajarat. Only thing is that he is not a hypocrite. He is superior to the hypocrite. So what is Shankaracharya's comparison between the two? Mityachara is outwardly inactive, whereas Karma Yogi is inactive. Karma Yogi is outwardly active. Mityachara is inwardly indulgent. Karma Yogi is inwardly restrained. Mityachara claims renunciation externally, whereas Karma Yogin accepts adhikara and doesn't renounce the actions. The Mityachara's bondage deepens, whereas through Karma Yoga, even though you are still in ignorance, the bondage weakens. Thus the superiority is not a moral prize but an ontological progression towards Chitta Shuddhi. Ignorance plus action is inevitable because action is only in a state of ignorance. Whereas unregulated action binding, whereas a regulated desireless action can purify. And therefore the purification improves the Chitta Shuddhi or the inner instrument of knowledge. And that leads to the Jnana Nishta or the path of knowledge. So do not renounce action until knowledge arises. Do not cling to action once knowledge has risen. This is Shankaracharya's final advice to us. So 3.5 said action is unavoidable. 3.6 said false renunciation is a hypocrisy. 3.7 says true Karma Yoga is a disciplined engagement. And now the next one is 3.8. Niyatam Kuru Karmani as a social cosmic grounding for Karma Yoga, or a tight contrast which we have been seeing in verses number 3.67, etc. We will take that 3.8 tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Monday. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Thank you. Dhanyawad.
Thank you very much, Binduji. I've opened the chat and hand raising. Is there any follow-up discussions?
Namaste Srini.
Namaste Binduji. Quick question. So
Yes.
what is being referred to as Vidyachara here also includes what is generally referred to as Vamachara, right? Like mantra, yantra, tantra, those kind of things. This includes
No,
that
no,
also?
no, no, no. It is purely a pseudo sannyasi. He is sitting idle under a tree or in an ashrama or in a meditation pose, but his mind is fully engaged in Vishaya Sakti, means sensual enjoyment. He remembering or, recollecting, or he may be getting the smell of a good food which is coming from the kitchen side. He may be thinking about the food, even while externally he may be showing he is in meditation. Such persons are called Mityacharas.
Okay. So then the other things will come under Karma Yoga or that kind of thing, is it?
Yes,
Okay. That was it. I mean, very beautiful session actually. The third chapter is like surpassing second chapter for me. I think it feels like.
Yeah, each chapter is unique in its own way, because we can associate so much with what Krishna is saying. He knows us in and out, because he's the one who knows everything. No, so that's why when he says, we cannot counter him or cannot say you are making a foolish statement. I am not like this. You cannot say that, because we are all going through these states, or we have gone through, or we are still going through. We don't know. All those things we'll have to acknowledge that Krishna has got perfect knowledge of everything.
Yeah, thank you very much for these beautiful sessions, Binduji. Deep thanks.
Thank you, Srini. Okay, then, Prakash.
Okay, Binduji, let's connect. Let's
Tomorrow
meet
tomorrow
tomorrow.
we'll have tomorrow we'll have your this thing. And you said your question, you have reserved it for tomorrow, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm reminding you.
Okay. Sure. Yes.
I not forgotten.
See, some of the questions get dissolved.
Oh, okay, doesn't matter. But if you have got something, yes, what you asked and how it got resolved, if you tell that to all of us, it will make much more interesting for all of us also. Because
Definitely.
what came as a question and how it got resolved in subsequent is also important, so that people can also learn from that, no?
Yes, certainly.
Right.
Yes. So we'll meet tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. IST for an open discussion on Bhagavad Gita, not a continuation of the classes. And then on Sunday, as we have the normal schedule, Bindoji will handle all the questions related to Advaita or related questions. And it's not just for him to answer. Even if you have any points to make, you can come up, and Bindoji is always willing to engage with all kinds of questions. So again, thank you very much, Bindoji. Just a reminder for the others, the replays are available if you want to listen to them in Clubhouse, or you can go into the links shared in the chat. One is a YouTube link called Advaita Retold. The second one is the Apple Podcast, and third is Spotify, where you can have a repository of not just Bhagavad Gita, but earlier, just before that was Aparokshana Buddhi, and before that was the Upanishadic text, Upanishads. So again, thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much, Bindoji. Over to you to close the session.
Thank you, Prakash. Thank you, Srini. And thank you, all of you. We'll meet tomorrow with the question answers, tomorrow and Sunday. And 3.8, we'll do it on Monday onwards. Thank you. Hari Om. Good night.
Hari Om. Good night.